In 1924, a farm family in Iowa could survive an entire winter without setting foot in a store. No refrigerator, no freezer, no grocery run, just skills passed down through generations that turned a few acres into everything they needed. But here is the twist. Number 14 on this list was so common the USDA printed millions of pamphlets teaching it, then went quiet once companies started selling the replacement. And number 3 kept eggs fresh for 8 months without a lick of electricity, something your refrigerator still cannot do better. These 25 skills were once as ordinary as knowing how to read. Then, in a single generation, we forgot almost all of them. Before we start, hit that subscribe button, because some of these might come in handy sooner than you think. Let us count down. Number 25, rendering lard. Before shortening came in a can, every farm kitchen ran on lard, and making it was the first job after the fall hog was butchered. Your great-grandmother cut the leaf fat, the pure white fat, from around the kidneys into small cubes and set it in a heavy iron kettle over low heat for hours. She stirred constantly so it never scorched, watching the fat melt into clear golden liquid, while the crackling bits, the cracklings, browned and floated to the top. She strained it through cheesecloth into stone crocks where it set snowy white and kept for a year in the cellar. One good hog gave 40 pounds of lard, enough for a whole year of pie crust, biscuits, and frying. And the cracklings went into cornbread. Nothing was wasted. A skill worth a season of grocery money, gone in a generation. Number 24, darning and mending. A pair of wool socks cost real money in 1922, so nobody threw one away over a hole. Your great-grandmother kept a darning egg, a smooth wooden egg on a handle, in her sewing basket for exactly this. She slipped it inside the sock to stretch the worn spot tight, then wove new thread across the hole in a tiny basket weave, over and under, until the gap disappeared into a soft patch that could take another year of walking. Elbows got patched, collars got turned, and a shirt lived 3 lives before it became a rag. Girls learned this by 8 years old. A whole evening by the lamp went to mending, while the men whittled and the kettle sang. We buy a 10-pack now and toss the survivors. She made one pair outlast a decade. Number 23, braiding onions and garlic. When the onions came out of the ground in late summer, they did not go in a mesh bag. Your great-grandmother left the tops on, let them dry in the sun for a few days, then braided the papery stems together into long ropes, weaving in a length of twine for strength. She hung those braids from the rafters of the pantry or the back porch, out of the light and away from damp. Air circled every bulb so nothing rotted against its neighbor, and a good braid kept sound onions clear through to spring. Garlic got the same treatment. It looked handsome hanging there, but that was never the point. The point was that a bulb pulled from a braid in February was as firm as the day it left the garden. Refrigerator crisper drawers turn onions to mush in 3 weeks. Hers lasted 8 months in the open air. Number 22, reading the weather by nature. There was no app and no 5-day forecast, so your great-grandfather read the sky, the animals, and his own aching knees. A ring around the moon meant rain within a day or two. Cows lying down in the field, swallows flying low, the smell of the pond carrying farther than usual, all of it told him whether to cut hay or leave it standing. He watched the smoke from the chimney. If it rose straight, fair weather held. If it curled down and hugged the ground, a storm was building pressure. Pine cones closing up meant moisture in the air. He was not superstitious. He was reading real barometric and humidity changes through the things around him, and getting it wrong meant a whole field of hay ruined by rain. Generations of watching taught him to predict a day ahead with nothing but his eyes. Number 21. Sharpening on a whetstone. A dull tool was a dangerous tool and a slow one, so every farm had a whetstone and every man knew how to use it. Your great-grandfather kept a flat stone by the kitchen door and a round one at the grindstone in the barn. He would wet the stone with a little water or spit, then draw the blade across at a steady low angle, the same angle every stroke, listening for that clean whispering sound that meant the edge was taking. A knife came off sharp, enough to shave hair off his forearm, the old test. He touched up the scythe every few passes through the hay, the axe before every woodpile. It took 2 minutes and cost nothing. We throw out dull blades or send them off now, having lost the feel for an angle that a farm boy learned before he could drive a team. Number 20. Clabber and soft cheese. When the milk pail sat out and the cream was skimmed, the leftover milk did not spoil. It clabbered. In the warm kitchen, raw milk naturally soured and thickened into clabber, something between yogurt and soft cheese, tangy and set. Your great-grandmother ate it with a spoon and a little maple sugar, or she went one step further. She tied clabbered milk in a cloth bag and hung it over a bowl overnight, letting the whey drip out until what remained was a soft, fresh cheese ready to spread on bread with salt and chives. The whey went to the pigs or into bread dough. A gallon of milk that would have soured into waste became breakfast, cheese, and hog feed. No rennet, no cultures from a packet, just the wild bacteria already in the milk, doing the work our ancestors trusted completely. Number 19. Apple cider vinegar from scraps. Nobody bought vinegar when the orchard gave apples for free. After pressing cider in the fall, or just from the peels and cores left over from making applesauce, your great-grandmother filled a crock with apple scraps and water, covered it with a cloth, and set it in a warm corner. The wild yeasts turned the sugar to alcohol. Then the alcohol slowly turned to vinegar over a few weeks, forming a cloudy raft on top called the mother. She strained off sharp golden cider vinegar for pickling, for salad dressing, for cleaning, and even for dosing a sore throat with honey. A crock cost nothing and ran almost by itself. The mother could be saved to start the next batch, so a single crock became a lifetime supply. We pay $4 a bottle now for what her apple peels made in the corner of the kitchen. Number 18. Lye soap from wood ashes. First pattern break, and here is where it gets clever. Your great-grandmother made every bar of soap the family used, and she made it from 2 things she would otherwise have thrown away: fireplace ashes and rendered fat. She packed hardwood ashes into a barrel with straw at the bottom, poured water over the top, and let it drip through into a bucket, leaching out lye. She tested the strength by floating an egg. If it bobbed up the size of a quarter, the lye was ready. Then she boiled that lye with saved kitchen fat, stirring for hours until it thickened. Here is the part science later confirmed. That reaction is saponification, the exact same chemistry every soap company uses today. She was running an industrial process in a kettle in the yard, controlling a caustic reaction by eye and by egg, and turning waste ash and waste grease into a year of clean. Number 17. The spring house. Before the electric refrigerator reached the countryside, and most farms did not get power until the late 1930s, keeping food cold was a matter of engineering, not electricity. Many farms were built over or beside a cold spring, and a small stone building, the spring house, was raised right over the running water. Your great-grandmother set crocks of milk, butter, and cream down into troughs where the spring water flowed around them, holding a steady 50 degrees no matter how hot the July afternoon. Butter stayed firm, milk stayed sweet for days, meat kept overnight before cooking. The constant cold water did what a refrigerator does, but it never broke down and never cost a cent to run. Families without a spring dug a cool cellar or lowered food into the well on a rope. A whole science of keeping food cold, powered by nothing but the earth. Number 16. Churning butter. That skimmed cream did not go to waste. It went into the churn. And churning was a job that fell to whoever was around, often the children. Your great-grandmother let the cream ripen slightly at room temperature, which built flavor, then poured it into the tall wooden dash churn. Then came the work, plunging the dasher up and down, sometimes for 45 minutes, until the cream broke and yellow flecks of butter gathered. She poured off the buttermilk, saving it for biscuits and pancakes, then washed the butter in cold water and worked it with a paddle to press out every drop of moisture, because leftover buttermilk would turn it rancid. A little salt for keeping, and she pressed it into a carved wooden mold that stamped a design on top. One cow gave a family all the butter it could eat, plus extra to trade at the store. Number 15. Sauerkraut and fermenting. Second pattern break, and this one your doctor would approve of. When the cabbage came in, your great-grandmother did not just store it. She fermented it into kraut that lasted all winter and kept the family healthy through the months with no fresh vegetables. She shredded cabbage fine, salted it, and pounded it down in a stone crock until the salt drew out enough brine to cover it completely. A plate and a stone held it under, and she left it to bubble and sour for weeks in the cool cellar. Here is what she knew without knowing the words for it. That fermentation grew lactic acid bacteria, the same probiotics sold in expensive supplements today, and it preserved the vitamin C that stopped scurvy through the winter. Sailors and farm families alike survived on it. She was running a controlled bacterial culture in a crock, feeding her family living food generations before anyone printed the word probiotic on a label. Number 14. Smoking and curing meat. Here is the skill the USDA taught in millions of pamphlets, then let quietly fade. With no refrigeration, the fall hog had to be preserved to feed the family until summer, and the smokehouse did it. Your great-grandfather rubbed hams and bacon with salt, sugar, and saltpeter, packing them down for weeks to draw out moisture and stop spoilage. Then he hung them in the smokehouse over a slow, cool fire of hickory or apple wood, smoking them for days. The smoke and salt together made the meat shelf-stable for a year, hanging in the open air, developing that deep amber color and rich flavor no store ham can match. A single hog, cured this way, carried a family clear through to the next butchering. When home freezers arrived, the smokehouse fell silent, and a skill that fed rural America for 2 centuries slipped out of living memory in about 30 years. Number 13. Tallow candles. Winter nights were long and dark, and store-bought candles cost money, so your great-grandmother made her own from the beef fat left after rendering. She melted tallow in a pot, then dipped lengths of cottonwick into it, lifting them out to cool, dipping again, building up each candle layer by layer over dozens of patient dips. Some families owned tin molds that made 6 at once, poured full of hot tallow with a wick strung down the center. It was slow work, usually done on a cold day when the kitchen was warm anyway, and a good afternoon made enough candles to light the house for weeks. Tallow candles smoked a little and smelled faintly of beef, but they turned the fat from the butchering into light through the darkest months. When kerosene lamps and then electric bulbs arrived, candle dipping vanished, another whole animal skill lost. Number 12. Braided rag rugs. Not a scrap of cloth was wasted, and worn-out clothes had one last life as a rug. Your great-grandmother tore old shirts, dresses, and feed sacks into long strips, then braided 3 strips together into a thick rope, joining new strips in as she went, so the braid never ended. She coiled that braid round and round, stitching each row to the last with heavy thread, building an oval rug from the center out. A big one took weeks of evening work, and it landed by the bed or in front of the stove, warm underfoot, on a cold plank floor. Feed companies knew this and started printing their sacks in pretty patterns just so farm wives would choose their brand. When the rug wore through, the rags went to the compost. Cloth cost too much to bury a single thread of it. Number 11. Packing the root cellar. The root cellar was the family refrigerator, pantry, and grocery store all in one, and packing it right in the fall meant the difference between eating and going hungry by March. Your great-grandmother knew that potatoes needed dark and cool or they would sprout, that apples gave off a gas that spoiled everything nearby so they were kept apart, and that carrots and beets stayed crisp, buried in boxes of damp sand. Cabbages hung by their roots. Squash sat up on shelves where air moved around them. She checked it weekly, pulling any vegetable starting to turn before it rotted the whole bin, the old rule that one bad apple spoils the barrel. Done right, a cellar held enough food to feed a family of 8 from October to May. It took real knowledge of what wanted moisture, what wanted dry, and what could not touch its neighbor. Number 10. Sourdough and homemade yeast. Third pattern break. There was no packet of yeast at the general store you could count on, so your great-grandmother captured her own from the air. She mixed flour and water, left it in a warm spot, and fed it daily until wild yeasts and bacteria colonized it into a bubbling living starter, some of which were kept alive and passed down for decades. When she baked, a cup of that starter raised the whole batch of bread. If she wanted fresh yeast, she boiled potatoes, mashed them with a little sugar and some starter, and grew a fresh batch overnight. Here is what modern science confirmed: that wild culture is a stable ecosystem of yeast and lactobacillus. The same partnership artisan, bakeries now charge premium prices to recreate. She kept a living organism alive on the kitchen shelf, feeding it like a pet, and it fed the family bread every single day. Number 9. Quilting from scraps. Every bed on the farm needed covers, and buying blankets was out of the question, so your great-grandmother built them from the scrap bag. She saved every usable piece of worn clothing and leftover fabric, cutting them into squares and triangles and piecing them together into patterns with names like log cabin and flying geese, patterns passed hand to hand between women. She stitched the top, layered it over wool or cotton batting and a plain back, then stretched the whole thing on a quilting frame that hung from the ceiling. Neighbors gathered for a quilting bee, a dozen women stitching and talking around one frame, finishing a quilt in a day. Those quilts warmed 3 generations and told the story of the family in their fabric, a piece of Grandpa's shirt next to a baby's outgrown dress. Warmth, art, and memory, all sewn from things too worn to wear. Number 8. Threshing and winnowing grain. Before the combine, getting wheat and oats from the field to the flour bin was all done by hand and by wind. Your great-grandfather cut the grain with a scythe or cradle, bound it into sheaves, and stood them up in shocks to dry in the field. Then came threshing, beating the dried stalks with a flail, 2 sticks joined by leather to knock the grain loose from the straw on the barn floor. That left grain mixed with chaff, and here the wind did the work. He tossed the mixture up into the air on a breezy day, and the light chaff blew away while the heavy grain fell straight back into the basket. Winnowing, a technique older than history itself, cleaned the grain for grinding. It was slow, dusty, muscle-aching work, but it turned a field into a winter of bread with nothing but a stick and the wind. Number 7. Boiling sorghum syrup. Sugar cost money, but sorghum cane grew right in the field, and every fall the whole community came together to turn it into syrup. Your great-grandfather grew a patch of sorghum, cut the tall canes, and stripped the leaves. Then the cane went through a mill, often turned by a mule walking in slow circles, crushing out the sweet green juice. That juice was boiled for hours in a long, shallow pan, skimmed constantly, as it foamed and darkened, cooking down maybe 10 gallons of juice into 1 gallon of thick amber syrup. It took a practiced eye to know exactly when to pull it, because a minute too long turned it bitter. That syrup sweetened everything through the year, poured over biscuits and stirred into gingerbread. Sorghum making was a festival as much as a chore. Neighbors gathered around the boiling pan late into the crisp fall night. Number 6, keeping bees. Sugar was dear, so honey was gold, and many farms kept a few hives to sweeten the pantry and pollinate the orchard. Your great-grandfather kept bees in simple boxes or old-fashioned straw skeps, and he learned to read the hive when it was calm, when it was crowded, and about to swarm, when it was time to take honey. He worked them with a smoker, puffing cool smoke to gentle the bees before opening the hive, then lifting out combs heavy with capped honey. He cut the wax caps and let the honey drain, saving the beeswax for candles, salves, and waterproofing. A strong hive gave 50 pounds of honey a year, all of it free after the bees were established. And the same bees pollinated every apple and every squash on the place. It took nerve and knowledge, reading thousands of insects as one living thing. Number 5, saving seeds. Fourth pattern break, and this one shaped the food itself. Nobody bought seed packets every spring because your great-grandmother saved her own from the best plants in the garden. She marked the finest tomato, the sweetest melon, the earliest bean, and let those go to full seed while the rest were eaten. She dried the seeds carefully, fermented tomato seeds to clean them, and stored everything in labeled jars and envelopes in a cool, dry place. Here is what she was really doing. By choosing seed from her best and hardiest plants year after year, she was breeding varieties perfectly adapted to her own soil and climate, open-pollinated heirlooms that grew truer and stronger every generation. Modern hybrid seeds will not grow true from saved seed, which is exactly why we buy new ones every year. She was a plant breeder without the title, keeping a genetic library alive in mason jars on the shelf. Number 4, rendering tallow into salve. The doctor was miles away and cost money the family did not have, so the kitchen was also the pharmacy, and rendered fat was the base of it all. Your great-grandmother melted clean tallow or lard and infused it with herbs from the garden and the fence rows, plantain leaf for cuts and stings, calendula for burns, comfrey for aches. She strained out the herbs and let the salve set in small tins, keeping one by the door and one in the barn. That grease-based salve held the medicine against the skin and sealed a wound from dirt, and the herbs really did carry compounds we now recognize: plantain drawing out infection, calendula easing inflammation. She healed chapped hands, cracked heels, and cow scratches alike from those little tins. A whole tradition of home medicine built on the fat left over from butchering and the plants growing wild by the road. Number 3, water glass eggs. Here is the one from the intro, and it still amazes people. Hens lay heavily in spring and summer, then nearly stop in the cold months, so your great-grandmother preserved the summer surplus to have eggs all winter. She mixed sodium silicate, called water glass, with water in a stone crock, then gently lowered in clean, fresh, unwashed eggs so the natural coating stayed intact. The water glass sealed every pore of the shell, locking out air and bacteria, and the eggs kept for up to 8 months submerged in that cool cellar crock. She lifted them out as needed, rinsed them, and used them for baking and cooking straight through to spring. No refrigeration, no freezing, just chemistry in a crock. Your refrigerator keeps an egg maybe 5 weeks. She kept a whole summer of eggs through the whole winter, and the method still works exactly as well today. Number 2, butchering the hog. When cold weather set in, the whole farm turned to butchering, the single most important day of the year for a family's food supply. It took skill, timing, and the help of neighbors, and above all, it wasted nothing. Your great-grandparents used every part of the animal: the hams and bacon for smoking, the shoulders for sausage, the fat for lard, the trimmings ground with sage and stuffed into casings. The head and feet became head cheese and pickled treats. The intestines became casings, and the bones flavored soup for weeks. As the old saying went, they used everything but the squeal. One hog, handled with all this knowledge, fed a family for the better part of a year. It was a hard, sober day of real work, but it was also security, the deep satisfaction of knowing the smokehouse was full and no one would go hungry. Number 1. Planting by the almanac. And crowning the list, the skill that tied all the others together, working with the calendar and the sky instead of against them. Your great-grandfather kept the farmer's almanac by the door and planted, harvested, and butchered by its guidance, along with knowledge handed down for generations. He knew to sow root crops in the dark of the moon and leafy crops in the light. To plant after the last frost date, his own experience had taught him to butcher in cold weather so the meat would keep. He read the length of the days, the temperature of the soil tested with his bare hand, the behavior of the birds. Whether or not every moon sign held true, the discipline of it, the deep attention to season and weather and timing is what made a farm succeed. It was the master skill, the one that decided whether the cellar was full or empty when winter came. Everything else on this list depended on it. Here is my challenge to you. Pick one of these and try it this month. Braid your onions instead of bagging them. Start a jar of scrap apple vinegar on the counter. Save the seeds from your best tomato. Then come back and tell me if I am wrong. Tell me if these old skills were just nostalgia, or if your great-grandparents actually knew something we let slip away. Because I have tried a few, and I cannot go back. My onions last all winter now. My sourdough starter has a name. Tell me in the comments which one you are trying, and which skill your own family still remembers. They knew. Now you know too.